Hello, welcome, and good morning, everyone. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Sheila North. Welcome you here. I'm a member of the Bonbonibi Cree Nation and also the former Grand Chief of Manitoba, Kiwetinawi Okimakanak, and I'm also the host of the CBC Winnipeg News Late Night. And tip, you might want to remember that for one of the quizzes going forward. Before we begin, though, I'd like to start by acknowledging that we are joining together today virtually on Treaty 1 territory, and the land on which we are gathered upon is traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Metis Nation. Thank you all so much for joining us on CBC Manitoba 1870 Homeland of the Metis podcast listening party. We want to give a special shout out to the following schools who are online with us right now. I wish I could see you all. And pardon my French. I've never learned a lick of French, so I'll try my best. École John Stubbs, R.B. Russell, Island Lake First Nation School, I believe is in Saskatchewan, St. John's Ravenscourt School, St. James Assiniboia School Division, Oak Park, École Secondaire Neelan High School, MET Center or Met Center for Arts and Technology, Inwood School, Edmund Partridge School, École Selkirk Junior High, College Churchill High, CCHS, Grant Park High, McLeod, and École Communautaire Real Berard. I probably said that so badly, but I apologize. We also promised prize packs to the first 4 schools who registered for this listening party, and we're happy to share with you the lucky winners of our contests. So here they are. Kukum Joanna Young from École John Stubbs from Souk, British Columbia. Congratulations. And Deidre Bannister from Robert B. Russell from Winnipeg, Manitoba. R.B. Russell, congratulations. And Hazel Aheneque from the Island Lake First Nation School from Saskatchewan. Congratulations. And Heather Ragot from St. John's Ravenscourt School from Winnipeg, Manitoba. Congratulations. And I hope that you enjoy your prizes. If you're just joining us on this live stream, we're so excited to spend the next hour with you. But before we get into the main event, I want to take a moment to share a few quick housekeeping details with you. If you have questions about the viewing stream, we have a virtual concierge who can assist you throughout the entire event. You can send your questions to communications.winnipeg@cbc.ca. And I think a bunch of us had technical difficulties just now. So if you're having technical difficulties, email communications.winnipeg@cbc.ca. And finally, through this live stream, we'll be using a platform that you might already be familiar with. It's pretty cool. It's called Kahoot. Here's what you have to do to participate. Please take out your phone or tablet and go to the address there, https://kahoot.it, and type in the game PIN number, which is on your screen as well, 07604768. After you type in the PIN number, you click the icon enter, and wait for your verbal prompts in the game and participate by answering our Homeland of the Métis trivia questions. So that's all the information is there as well. So look for that. And we have room to accommodate 100 players for this round. So the more quickly you log on to Kahoot, you will secure your spot to play. Let's try a test question. Is everyone ready? Okay, I'll give you a second to log on. This is a test question. Should be very easy. Please enter after putting the game pin number 07604768 and answer this question. Question 1, what CBC Manitoba program do I host? Your options are A, CBC Winnipeg Late Night, B, Information Radio, C, CBC Winnipeg News at 6, or D, Up to Speed. All really good shows. Which show do I host? Fairly new. The answer, of course, is A, CBC Winnipeg Late Night. Congratulations to everyone who got that right. Now, here's the hard part. Do not advance to the next question until I tell you, okay? I know we're click happy sometimes. I am. Let's get to it, though. Here is an episode 3 of 1870 Homeland of the Métis podcast, Roostertown. So pay attention, and then we'll ask you some questions after that and get into some games. So here we go.
I'll tell you the story. At work, I had this guy come up to me and he says to me, "What reserve are you from?" I said, "I don't come from reserve." He said, "Well, your family, what reserve they come from?" I said, "My family did not come from reserve." "Oh, yeah, you people came from reserve. You were born in a reserve." I said, "No, I wasn't." He says, "Did you live in Winnipeg all your life? Did your mom and dad live in Winnipeg?" I said, "Yes. They came from St. Norbert." No, before that, And I said, "Okay." I said, "You want to know what reserve I'm from?" I said, "I'm from Roostertown." "Roostertown? Never heard of that reserve." I said, "You know where the Pan Pool is?" I said, "That's where Roostertown is." "Well, there's no reserve there." I said, "Well, that's where I'm from."
Frank Sayas was born in Roostertown, July 1st, 1942. Roostertown was a small Métis community that formed on the outskirts of Winnipeg in 1901. It wasn't a reserve, but I imagine that the man who asked Frank about his reserve asked because many First Nation people lived on reserves, and Frank looks like he could be First Nation.
In those days, there was no such thing as Métis. You're either Indian or half-breed. And like I heard that the other day on the radio, somebody was called a half-breed, and they said that was pretty hurtful words. And they were Métis, just like I am.
I'm Stephanie Cram, host of Muddied Water, 1870, Homeland of the Métis, Episode 3, Roostertown. Roostertown was a Métis settlement that existed between 1901 and the late 1950s in southwest Winnipeg. It's one of many Métis settlements that formed and fought for survival as Canada continued to settle the West. And as we'll hear from Frank Sayas in this episode, the destruction of communities like Roostertown had a lasting impact. Where you come from is an important part of how you identify as a Métis person. Me, I'm from Alberta, with family ties to Lac St. Anne, a mostly Métis community. It's also not a reserve. Rather, it's a community that just so happens to have a rich Métis history. Now, talking about Roostertown has me thinking about something truly unique about my home province, the Métis settlements. It's the first and only stretch of land in Canada completely owned and controlled by an Indigenous group. When my parents were married in 1974, they were poor and saving money to buy their first house. My mom tells me that she suggested to my dad that they should apply for a stretch of land in the Métis settlements, but my city-dwelling father scoffed at the idea. To this day, I wonder how my life would be different if I was born in the settlements, if I grew up in a Métis community surrounded by culture. But then again, a place to call home isn't always enough as Métis people, because history tells us that in a moment, that home could be gone.
Oh, it was pure chance, pure lucky chance.
That's Evelyn Peters, who stumbled on the story of Roostertown through her work as a Canada Research Chair and professor at the University of Winnipeg.
I had some research assistants working on the manuscript census for 1901, and they found a record of this 1901 community, in quotes, in the bush. And one of the research assistants had grown up in Winnipeg and had heard about Roostertown. So he was really interested. So I said, well, see what's available. And we found virtually nothing.
Evelyn and her team started combing through municipal records to put Roostertown literally back on the map and determine the families that lived there.
It was a series of houses that were scattered, and many of them were quite far away from each other, scattered through the largely brush and prairie that existed in that area. And we found some aerial photos that showed paths between the houses. There were no roads, there was no indoor plumbing, no electricity, none of the city infrastructure. Getting water was always a huge...
I started hauling water.
It's a huge issue.
The first pump that I can remember, that was on Weatherden and Wilton. That was the first pump.
Frank had a couple of horses, I think it was.
Well, we had a horse.
And 2 big barrels.
And we were charging 75 cents a barrel.
And that's how he would take water, especially to the people living further out west, because there were no good wells there. That wasn't an area where it was easy to dig wells. And the city refused to extend water through the settlement at that point in time.
It's hard to imagine what is now the Fort Rouge neighborhood in Winnipeg as a place where you'd need to haul water. From the archival photos and even building permits, we can see that many of the houses were handmade shanties, which in some ways kind of look like the modern, in-fashion tiny houses of today. There were also standard bungalows and even 2-story houses, some of which were so well constructed, they are still standing. Initially, the houses were spread out in clusters, but the community became more centralized as time went on.
So at the time when the community was dissolved, there was a cluster on Ash and Oak Street across Kenniston. And then there was another cluster that was exactly where the Grant Park Mall was. And then actually by 1961, the Ash and the Oak Street residents had moved across the street to a couple of streets near the Grant Park Mall. And that's they bought houses and they lived near each other there.
One of the difficulties in gathering information about Roostertown was that no one who lived there wants to speak about it.
Frank later told me that he really did not want to talk to either of us because he thought we were going to reproduce the stereotypes that the newspapers had printed in the 1950s.
We were called bootleggers. We were called everybody lived on welfare.
The newspapers saw this as a homogeneous community. Everyone was poor, living in shanties, dirty, on welfare. And I mean, clearly there was deep poverty there. I don't want to gloss that over. But there were also small, well-maintained houses, well-dressed children. The photos show people, beautiful family photos of families that were obviously very close. The myth that all the men were on welfare was absolutely false, as we know from the existing censuses and also from the voters lists that men worked. When men weren't around, then the women worked. You know, the only thing the newspapers wanted to talk about was parties, gambling, bootlegging, fights. And I mean, that was a small part of Roostertown, but it certainly didn't represent sort of daily life or most of the community.
And I mean, there was a few parties. Like, I mean, what I tell everybody, they used to start their, if they were having a party, they used to start their party on Thursday and they'd end it on Sunday. And there was a few fights. But, after on Monday, everybody's going to work and everything, they were still friends. Nobody got hurt.
Frank's stories of Roostertown have become an important part of Evelyn's research.
Frank started to come to the talks that I did, and when I finished, I would turn it over to him, and he would entertain the audience with stories about Roostertown. And very often had them laughing hilariously. But he was a really good storyteller. Well, he still is.
Welcome back, everyone. That was really educational. There's a lot of things in there that I had no idea of, and I've been living in the city for a long time, since 1987. And after listening to that clip, let's test your knowledge. I remember a lot of it, but let's see what you remember. Jumping into Kahoot questions, shall we? Pick up your smart devices and press next to receive our next question. Here we go. All right, we are starting with question 2. Stephanie Cram is a host of which CBC original podcast? Your choices are A, Recovering Filipino, D, Kiwel, C, 1870, Homeland of the Metis, and D, Winnipeg Famous. Go ahead and vote. We know there's a bunch of you in the game. Okay, here is the answer. You ready? The answer is 1870, Homeland of the Metis. Please hit the next button for our next question. Question 3. True or false? Louis Riel Day is February 21st. What do you think? True or false? The answer is, of course, true. That's right. That was an easy one. Please hit the next button for our next question. Here we go. Question 4. It's another true or false question. Roostertown still exists in Winnipeg. I know where the area is. The answer, though, is false. Please hit the next button for our next question. Kind of cool, though, to know about that. Here's question 5. What is the name of Stephanie's main guest on her Roostertown episode? Here are your choices. A, me, Sheila North. No. Okay, I gave that away, sorry. B, Louis Riel. C, Frank Says. Or D, none of the above. What's the answer? Here we go. The answer is Frank Says, of course. Congratulations to all you winners. We will play some more Kahoot a little later in the live stream. But now it's my great honor to welcome the host of 1870 Homeland of the Metis, Stephanie Cram, to our live stream. Hi, Stephanie.
Hello.
Let me read a little bit of your amazing bio.
Sorry?
I said, let me read a little bit of your amazing bio, and then we'll get to some questions, okay?
Sounds good.
Originally, she's from Edmonton, Alberta. Stephanie is a reporter now based here in Winnipeg. She has worked for CBC Indigenous Unit and now is CBC radio show Unreserved. Or she hosted on both, or she worked on both. She has recently hosted CBC television show called We Know the Truth, which aired on the first ever National Day for Truth and Reconciliation on September 30th, 2021, and was just nominated for a Canadian Screen Award. Congratulations to you and everyone on that team, Stephanie. She is currently the host of Weekend Morning Show on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM. Stephanie, thank you for joining us this morning. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Few technical
welcome.
Problems, but doing all right.
I know, me too. Yeah, it must have been really cool to work on that show and then get nominated for it. I mean, you don't do that for awards, but it's because it's very important. But that's really special, hey?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it was quite the honor to find out yesterday that we were nominated for a CSA.
That's amazing. There's so much to go through in the podcast, and not only in the episode Roostertown that touches on the theme of the place and how a place can really give insight into who you are as a person. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what brought you to Winnipeg?
Yeah, I am originally from Edmonton, as you said. I came to Winnipeg because of journalism. I went to Montreal for a little bit to get my degree, and then actually lived on a reserve in Northern Ontario. Shout out to Satchco Lake if anyone knows that community, to work there and teach journalism. And then that brought me to Winnipeg through a fellowship internship through the CBC Indigenous Unit, and as you said in my bio, I've worked for Unreserved. I work as my normal job is reporting, but right now I'm backfilling as as the host of the weekend morning show. So I've been a little bit everywhere at CBC, but that's what brought me here. And Winnipeg's been pretty awesome to me, so I've stuck around. It's been 6 years now.
Awesome. You even taught journalism. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And Roostertown is a displaced community that is now occupied by a shopping mall
Mhm.
and pool and other buildings. I actually don't live too far from there. Was it difficult to find residents to talk to for this episode, and how did you find them?
It surprisingly wasn't too hard to find them. It was just a matter of convincing them to talk. I think this is something that probably Sheila, you're used to a lot of times dealing with working on Indigenous stories is finding someone who wants to talk to the media, just because there is hesitancy. So I was able to track down Frank's son Daryl through Evelyn Peters, who wrote the book Roostertown, which we heard a little bit from Evelyn in the podcast there. So she connected me with Daryl, and then Daryl invited me to an event at just outside of the Pan Am pool. They were having an outdoor event. This was middle of the pandemic, where they were planning for a reunion for the people who lived in Roostertown. So I went the first time, not really with the intent of hooking anyone into the interview, but just to hear what they were talking about and building connections, because I think that's a big part of Indigenous reporting is you have to build the connections, not necessarily go in with the intent of interviewing people. So there I just talked to Frank, got to know him, didn't record anything, but then came back the next time that they were meeting, planning this big reunion. And I met a few other people from Roostertown as well. A lot of them were a bit hesitant to speak. Again, I think it's just years of dealing with racism or stereotyping, people assuming things because they were from Roostertown, that a lot of them were unwilling to talk to me. Totally
Yeah.
fine. And also the media portrayed Roostertown in a lot of ways. Like the Winnipeg Free Press had some pretty unfavorable coverage of Roostertown at the time. So I get why people don't want to speak. So it wasn't difficult to find them, but it was difficult to get them to talk.
Right, right.
Mhm.
And if our viewers have any questions for you, feel free to add them and I'll ask them to Stephanie. But a couple of quick ones. Does Frank still live in Winnipeg or near the area?
He does. I'm trying to think of where he lives. He lives in Winnipeg. And Daryl lives. They might live outside of Winnipeg now. It's been a while since I talked to them, but they definitely are still really connected with a lot of their family members who also lived in Roostertown. So there's a
Cool.
tiny little group there. But yeah.
Cool. And there's a lot of research, obviously, that went into your
Mhm.
podcast. And I suspect there are a few friends on this call that will be researching their papers for their teachers for Louis Riel Day. Do you have any tips for our friends on how to find more information?
Yeah, I think just being aware, a big tip I would have is just be aware of who is writing the history that you're reading, because it was within my lifetime, even the perceptions of Louis Riel has changed. I think most of the people on this call are young enough that he's not seen as a traitor, but at one point in certain school curriculums, he wasn't seen very favorably. So I
Mhm.
think when you're doing your research, just ask who's writing the history, and take a step back and see if you can find maybe an Indigenous voice on these issues. I know a big help for me was Jean Taye. She is the great grandniece of Louis Riel. She has written this massive book. It's very, very long, but it is called, I'm just going to get the name right for you all, The Northwest is Our Mother, the story of Louis Riel's people, the Métis Nation. So she wrote this very long history, and she's a very important Métis lawyer who has helped the Métis Nation with a lot of their legal issues over the years. So she's very well known, great grandniece of Louis Riel, and she wrote this book that was really helpful for me to do the initial research before diving into the podcast.
Amazing. And I bet there was a lot of interesting and intriguing things you discovered about Métis culture in doing your research. What was the most interesting and intriguing when you were preparing for the podcast?
Yeah. Well, because I'm originally from Edmonton, I knew Louis Riel was from Manitoba. I knew that he was instrumental to stick to bringing Manitoba into Confederation, but just the extent of the Métis Nation helping bring Manitoba into Canada, I didn't understand the extent to it. So looking into, say, the Manitoba Act and how the Métis were so heavily involved with drafting and creating the Manitoba Act, which was what, again, brought Manitoba into Canada, was a little bit surprising for me. And then also reading how there were protections for the Métis Nation in the Manitoba Act, promises of land, promises of protecting of culture. But then once this was passed and we were brought into Confederation, brought into Canada, a lot of those things the country didn't live up to those promises. So that, I think, was the most surprising for me, was how much the Métis were involved in making Manitoba what it is today.
Right. And we all know about stereotypes. What's an example of a stereotype or misconception that you wanted to challenge through your podcast?
Yeah, I think the big one for a lot of Métis people is that we're either not Indigenous enough, or we're not white enough, or you kind of play in this middle ground. So I wanted to really highlight the fact that we are a nation. We have a unique culture. We have a unique history that's worth looking into. And because I think that is often the case, is people get lumped into each other. But then on the flip side, I did want to explore even people who are more traditional. We have one episode on I interviewed an elder, Barbara Bruce, who's really well known in Winnipeg. She practices ceremony. She's very traditional. So I wanted to explore that as well, because I think that there's different interpretations of what it means to be Métis, as it is with First Nation people as well. There's different understandings of who you are as a person. So I wanted to explore all different parts, and hopefully the podcast touches on that.
Right. And what about this year's Louis Riel Day? Manitobans across the province will be commemorating that day on Monday. How will you be personally marking Louis Riel Day?
Well, it is my day off.
Oh, yay!
So normally, I'm from Alberta, which in Alberta it's known as Family Day. So it's a unique thing here in Manitoba. It's great that it's Louis Riel Day. I definitely think I'll give my mom a call, because again, it is Family Day. Why not reconnect with family back home? So that's probably how I'll be celebrating. No real big plans. It's a bit too cold for that.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it'll be a little bit warm.
Yes, hopefully.
Yeah. If you had to dedicate this podcast, 1870 Homeland of Métis, to someone, who would you dedicate it to?
I think I would dedicate it to all the people who participated in the podcast. Like I said, Jean Taillet was really lovely, and Frank, who was really hesitant to talk to us for the episode on Roostertown, because again, he says every time the media covers my story, they cover it wrong. So he was really, really trusting of us. So I'd love to dedicate at least definitely the Roostertown episode to him, and all the great voices. There were people that didn't make it into the podcast, but were so helpful, just touching base with a lot of people in the province, how supportive Métis people in Winnipeg were in helping me develop this podcast and put it out into the world. And of course, I'd love to dedicate it to my family back in Edmonton. My mom, Bonita, she was the one that always raised me to be proud of my culture. And of course, my grandparents who were always one to introduce me to what it meant to be Métis. So
excellent. Well, happy Louis Riel Day if I don't see you in person. Our
yes.
schedules are
yes, yeah, you'll be busy late night hosting.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. All right, so let's get back into more questions. We have time for a few more Kahoot questions before we say goodbye. I'll slow down this time. I think I was speeding a bit too much. Stephanie's going to stay with us on the screen for this speed round of Kahoot. Stephanie, come back. Get your smart devices out again and press next to advance to the next question. Okay, here's question 6. What buildings now occupy the area that was Roostertown? Here are your choices. A, Grand Park Shopping Mall. B, Grand Park High School. C, Pan Am Pool Complex. And D, all of the above. If you're in Winnipeg, or if you've ever been in Winnipeg, you'd know probably the answer pretty quick. But people from out of town, this will be interesting. So you can Google this Winnipeg and you'll see where it is. But the answer to that question is D, all of the above. Congratulations. If you had a good guess there, that's a really good guess if you're not from Winnipeg.
Yes, that's really hard to guess.
Okay, press advance to the next question, which is number 7. Besides Roostertown, what other Métis community is referenced in the episode excerpt? Your choices are, do you want to read the list, Stephanie?
Sure. There's Saint Laurent, Manitoba, La Ronge, Saskatchewan, Lac St. Anne, Alberta, and Batoche, Saskatchewan.
Excellent. You have a better French accent than I do. Métis accent. And okay. I think we'll go to the answer, which is Lac St. Anne, Alberta. Congratulations. All right, next question. I hope we're giving you enough time here. I kind of get too excited and just want to go, go, go. Okay, question 8 is the following. What is the instrument heard throughout the episode that is symbolic of the Métis culture? Give them the choices there, Stephanie.
We got a guitar, cello, banjo, and fiddle.
Yes, all really good instruments. I wish I could play all of them.
I play the fiddle, but very terribly. That might be a hint.
And the answer is of course, fiddle. What Stephanie plays. Okay, press next to advance to the next question. Here we go. The next question is a true or false one. True or false? Stephanie Cram is Métis from Edmonton, Alberta. Is this true or is it false? Edmonton, Alberta. It's a really nice town.
Mm-hmm.
I've been
It's
there
a big mall there.
Big slide or a water slide, right? A big
water slide, an amusement park inside the mall, everything.
Yeah. Skating rink even?
Yep.
Excellent. The answer to that is what, Stephanie?
It's true.
Yay! All right. And now press next to advance to the last question, which I'm going to let you answer on your own.
Aw, that's cute.
I think you're the best teacher here because you're the only teacher here and you're really good at it, Steph.
A teacher, I applaud all the teachers out there. As somebody who spent some time on a reserve teaching journalism, it takes a lot of patience. So shout out to all the teachers out there.
Yeah, it's not an easy job, that's for sure.
No.
I was a substitute teacher once, and that's where I realized how awesome teachers are.
Yes.
Well, the time has flown by. I wish we could stay and talk all day, Steph. Thank you for joining us. And of course, to all of you, all of the teachers across Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and British Columbia. I'm Sheila North, and I'm signing off for this morning. You can catch me every night if you're in Manitoba, or you can go online, CBC Winnipeg News at 11. And thank you for joining us. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Sheila.
Okay, bye.
See ya.